The question is that nudibranchs are in a certain niche.
Yeah,
What part do they
what
play?
do they indicate about the health of the?
And what do they indicate about the health of the environment that they live in? I know exactly what you're talking about. I've heard that too, that they're an indicator species, that if they have been in an area and suddenly they're not there anymore, it's an indication, possibly, most likely, of a pollutant in the water. But honestly, it's an area that I haven't studied as much. I have read that as well, that they are an indicator species, but other than that, I don't know what they indicate. Another question? Yes.
What's pushing the differentiation of these? There's so many forms in the same area.
So the question, why are there so many?
Why are so many forms of the same?
Right. Why are there so many different forms and species in the same area? That's another very good question. And I don't know. I mean, that's a question. I've just started myself to look into nudibranchs. I've only been diving for 5 years and only knew that nudibranchs existed myself, and that's a very good question. I don't know why there would be so many different species that eat the same food, or they seem to eat the same food, and yet they coexist. Sometimes nudibranchs will prey on each other, but I actually don't know why there would be a need for so many different shapes and colors in the same habitat. Something I'll look into. Yes.
What determines the direct and indirect process of their life cycle?
So what determines the indirect and direct process of their life cycle? It's species, depends on the species. I don't know why certain species have direct and other species have indirect, or even that third form that has the yolk bearing. I don't know. I don't know the answers. These are great questions, but I don't know if it's a particular species that always have indirect, like, say, for example, are all aeolids indirect and then all dorids direct? I don't know. I just found out myself that there was these different forms of life cycle of eggs, but I don't know which species or why one nudibranch develops one way and one does a different way. I imagine it would have to do with the food that they eat and whether it's available, because the indirect, the ones that are free-swimming veligers, they eat plankton and then settle down on food, so their food source must be available in lots of different places, whereas the direct development, the ones that hatch as nudibranchs, their food must be right there. There must not be the variety, or their food must not be spread out all over the place, or else it wouldn't benefit them. Or, I mean, they would need to just sort of hatch and there's their food. So I would imagine it has something to do with the availability of food and why they are indirect or direct developers. So another question, there's someone in the back. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that kind of the way evolution works is if a lot of them do well, it's usually because a lot of them can do well. And if only a few can do well, then only a few will do.
Okay. Yeah, so there are a lot of different kinds, which means that the environment would support there being a lot of different kinds. Great. Okay.
Do they not travel very far in their lifetime? They just land on this food source and they stay right in that immediate area?
So the question is, do they stay right in the immediate area once they hatch? And my reading is that they don't cover a lot of ground. Once they settle, they pretty much stay. That's where their food is, and that's where they stay. It's hard for me to know. I've tried to think of a way to tag nudibranchs because I can't tell. I mean, we dive in the same spot out front, and I probably have seen the same nudibranch on the same rock, on a different dive, but I can't be sure that I'm seeing the same exact one. Or am I seeing the one that yesterday I saw here, now I'm seeing it 20 feet away? I don't know. But my reading is that they do stay where their food is. They have no reason, as long as there's food, they don't need to, and they can't really move that quickly. And there's no need to move that away from their food. Okay, let's see, we'll start over here.
So they don't see very well, they don't travel very far. So they're using the rhinophore for whatever hunting they're doing, and is that chemotactic or actual olfaction?
Wow. I'm not sure. So the question is the smelling that they do, is that...
Is it hunting behavior, and is it just chemicals coming through the water?
Yes, it's chemicals coming. Well, but there's also the chemical trail that they leave. In other words, they find their mates that way as well, because the mucus, the slime trail that they leave behind does have a chemical component to it, and so they'll use their sensory organs to smell scents for finding mates, as well as from food.
And the magnetic Nudibranchs, they orient themselves magnetically as well.
They might do that. I'm not sure if they do magnetic orientation. Did you have a question?
I was wondering if there was specific to shallow water, or if we know of deep water species.
Okay. So are there shallow water and
Yeah,
deep?
I mean, like, are they mainly shallow water, but do we know of any deep water ones?
Yes. So the question is, are they mainly shallow, or are there deep water nudibranchs? And there are nudibranchs that only live in shallow water. There are nudibranchs that live in shallow and then deeper water. There are nudibranchs that only live in deeper water. And in fact, nudibranchs have actually been known about for much longer than scuba diving has been around. If you look at nudibranch, the naming of nudibranchs, it'll have a person's name and the year that it was named, and it goes back to the 1800s. And you go, how can they know about nudibranchs then? Well, they did dredging. They took a net and they just dug, they scooped stuff out of the water, and nudibranchs were part of what they scooped out of the water. So nudibranchs do live in from shallow to somewhat deep water. They tend to be like most of the life, though, that there's a sunlight layer, and that's where most of the life is. And once you get below a point where there's not a lot of sun, then there's not as much other life and other food for nudibranchs to eat. But they can, what I've seen, it can go down to below diving depths. Certainly, there are nudibranchs that live deeper, and probably the nudibranchs that are still yet to be discovered are the ones that are deeper water ones and below where people can dive. So
let's give Karen a big round of applause. People that have questions.